with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Wednesday, March 10th, 2021. My name is Sam Seder. This is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, journalist, Strike Wave editorial collective member, and author of Blood Red Lines, How Nativism Fuels the Right, Brendan O'Connor will join us. Meanwhile, massive COVID relief bill to be voted upon in the House today, and a 6th woman alleges sexual misconduct by a defiant and beginning to flail even more Andrew Cuomo. The House passes the PRO Act, a major pro-union piece of legislation. Arkansas, meanwhile, enacts a near-total abortion ban. The DCCC relents on its primary challengers consultant blacklist. That means more resources to primary Democrats. Joe Biden fails to address diversity visas from the Muslim ban. He does, however, drop the public charge restrictions on immigrants and extends the temporary protected status of up to 300,000 Venezuelans whose status was about to end. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau extends its lending protections to LGBTQ folks. And the Manhattan DA widens its Trump's probe. Massive layoffs hit HuffPost, devastating much of their reporting coverage. And lastly, a blast from the past. Milo Yiannopoulos declares he's ex-gay. All this and more on today's Majority Report. Yes, welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks so much for joining us. Glad you could make it. With me as always, and matching today.
It was not on
Emma
purpose.
Vigeland. This is not on purpose. I don't really want to go through how I dress myself on a daily basis, but I have multiple. I'm going to anyways. I have multiple blue shirts, and Wednesday is always laundry day in our house. And so I wear my blue shirts at the beginning of the week because I know I'm going to want to wear them again on Thursday. Mm-hmm. So Wednesday is my pivot day. That's the day I wear my white shirt. And then on Fridays, of course, I wear a soft collared shirt. So that's not the issue. And today I was looking at my closet and I was going, am I going to have a problem if I wear this white shirt? And
we got a problem.
Well, and then you decide to wear your glasses on the day that you wear the white shirt.
Well, okay, I've been experiencing eye strain. I got new prescriptions. So this is my, my astigmatism got worse.
Yep. Well, I got news for you. It's all ahead of you.
That's what happens.
Yeah.
And this is not like a sweater. This is what I wear on warmer winter days. As the weather warms up, I gotta put the sweaters back in the closet. I got to bring out the spring shirts. I haven't done that yet, so I went with the lighter winter shirt.
Yep.
And here we are.
There we go. So
I'm starting to sound like you two.
Yeah,
in my convoluted clothing explanations.
Yes, well, apologies in advance, folks. There you go. So we'll try and avoid this in the future, but it's going to be. I don't know if it becomes worse if I actually have to text you like, what are you wearing today? Like where we have to like, I don't know. All right.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, we thought this might be appropriate. We have the right in this country is the Republican Party is sort of flailing around trying to find something that they will use as their clothesline, if you will, over the course of the next couple of years in terms of like what are they going to argue about. Now we've gone through Suskazi, and everyone is still standing, of course. Now I don't know if they're going to have hearings on Dr. Seuss. The Republicans are going to attempt to. I don't know, but we seem to have gotten past that for the moment. We also have gotten through Potato Gate.
Right. No. It's Suskazi and Potato Gate.
Potato Gate. Correct. Okay. So, and that doesn't seem to have any traction. And it looks like the plan for the Republican Party. Now, of course, the Biden administration, their proposal for their bill for a $1.9 trillion COVID relief bill, which is going to provide a huge amount of material benefits to folks making a non-trivial amount of money. $75,000 for a family of 4 annually will receive double digits in terms of thousands of dollars, up to, or I should say as a baseline, close to $12,000, and $11,000 or $12,000. It goes up from there. And in addition to support for states and cities and for vaccinations, the vaccinations are rolling out. So what do you do if you're the Republican Party and you have no response to the COVID bill? Where will you go? What will you seek out to promote? Well, Representative Steve Scalise, he is the number 2, I believe, or number 3.
No, he's 2 because Cheney's 3.
Number 2 in the House. Steve Scalise famously said while running for office back in the day, I'm like David Duke without the baggage. And here he is making that point on the on Capitol Hill.
You could just look at the crisis on the border. It's a major national scandal. Jay Johnson, the Obama Homeland Security Secretary, once said that if there were 1,000 or more illegal crossings, that was a bad day. Today we're seeing 3,000 or 4,000 illegal crossings a day at our southern border. It is a national crisis, and it needs to be confronted by President Biden, and he refuses to acknowledge this. There are super spreader caravans coming across our southern border. I think it's an interesting, misplaced priority that the Biden administration's agenda is to open America's borders and close America's schools. This is the wrong approach. This is not focusing on the hardworking families of this country. The science says that the schools should be open now. Every school should be open, teaching kids in the classroom, and every day they refuse to do that, it's setting those kids back even further. Millions of American kids are being denied the ability to learn and to be able to compete.
So convoluted.
It
starts
is
with the caravan and then...
Well, it's a caravan super spreader.
Oh, right.
It's a super spreader caravan. But let's work backwards here for a moment. We know that the polls show that parents don't want to send their kids into school. The majority of parents don't want to send their kids into school. There is no great push to get their kids back into school because we are literally just a couple of months out from the vast majority of people being vaccinated, of having teachers vaccinated. We are literally weeks away from it being significantly safer for people to go back into schools.
And they've done polling on the class divide between seems like the upper class parents are more eager to send their kids back to school than the opposite, which is an interesting dynamic.
Without a doubt. And part of that is because folks who are living in low income areas have been hit by COVID more.
Yeah.
And particularly brown and black people have been subjected to more COVID. They have less medical facilities. They have more requirements that they travel for work, et cetera, et cetera. And we are also headed into spring. You're going to see schools be able to finally put their windows down open and get, some type of ventilation, because we didn't put any money into providing this. So that is falling upon largely deaf ears. And then this notion of a super spreader immigration thing, caravan. There is no caravan. There are no caravans. There was an attempt to sort of build a narrative of a massive caravan weeks and months ago. And the idea that you now are worried about super spreader events when you have spent literally the past year denying the existence of super spreader events.
And participating in one. I mean, were they screaming about a caravan super spreader as, 40,000 people packed into a gymnasium to watch Trump speak?
Or just
at the
Amy Coney Barrett celebration, essentially, that they had at the White House that got half the White House infected.
Yeah.
No, but it is interesting, and it is also apropos for our guest today.
And I will say, they're scraping the bottom of the barrel here. There's really a lack of a strong voice on the right now, with Trump being deplatformed, essentially. They don't know how to message this effectively, and I think it's showing.
We'll see, because there's a lot of kindling for a message, an anti-immigrant message on the right. And in a moment, we'll speak to Brendan O'Connor, whose book, Blood Red Lines, How Nativism Fuels the Right, explains just that. We'll be right back after this. Meanwhile, I guess I've copped to this in the past. For many years, I did not wear deodorant. Don't look at me like that. I just didn't. I
don't wear deodorant, but I smell fresh
my
as
whole
a daisy, so.
I mean, I shower on a regular basis.
Yeah.
But I was concerned about putting stuff like heavy metals or light metals or whatever it is. I didn't want that stuff. And now I don't know if that stuff has a detrimental impact on your health or not, but I was convinced I wanted no part of it. However, at one point I realized, I've got to maybe up my game a little bit and probably need some deodorant. And so what I did, I switched to Native. And Native, you can find it at nativedeo.com, does not have all that aluminum and parabens and God knows what else. It's made with ingredients you've heard of, like coconut oil, shea butter, has over 10 scents. They're classics and they're rotating seasonals. You're guaranteed to find one you like. The classic scents include coconut and vanilla, lavender and rose. It's hard for me to say that. Cucumber and mint, citrus and herbal musk. The other thing I think people know about me at this point is I am a little bit sensitive to smells. So for me, the unscented. Although I've had luck with the cucumber and mint and the coconut and vanilla, but I go with the unscented. And frankly, the sensitive collection, of course, because I'm a little bit of a soy boy, apparently. And that one is made without baking soda. If one of your New Year's resolutions is cut down on your plastic consumption, Native now offers a line of plastic-free deodorants for their most popular scents. There's a reason why Native has over 16,000 five-star reviews, because it works, and it does. Get free shipping on every order, plus 30-day free returns and exchanges in the U.S. Make the switch to Native today by going to nativedeo.com/Majority Report, or use the promo code Majority Report at checkout. You get 20% off your first order. That's nativedeo, nativedeo.com/majority report. You can use the promo code majority report instead at checkout for 20% off your first order. And lastly, folks stressed out this period of time. And I know I have tough time sleeping. I know I do. Of course, I've always had a tough time sleeping, but maybe you're having trouble focusing. Well, it'd be nice if there was like an easy little thing you could put in your pocket that would help you sleep, focus, act, just be better.
Yeah.
Well, there is. And if you got 10 minutes, Headspace can change your life. It is your daily dose of mindfulness in the form of guided meditations in an easy-to-use app. It's advancing the field of mindfulness and meditation through clinically validated research. There are over 25 published studies on Headspace benefits, 600,000 five-star reviews, and over 60 million downloads. Headspace has a particular approach to mindfulness that can reduce stress. It can improve your sleep. It can help you focus. It can increase your overall sense of well-being. If you can't sleep, you're overwhelmed, Headspace has wind-down sessions and 3-minute SOS meditations. So you can do it quick.
Gotta be quick.
Gotta be quick. There are even meditations for kids. And the beauty about Headspace, it works on your schedule, anytime, anywhere. And for me, it's the walking ones. Because I need to dual purpose everything. And so to be able to like walk to work and also do a mindfulness.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's not the point. I know I need to I need some of this.
It's helpful for people like us, I think. I need to do it because I'm always fiddling or doing something or distracted or whatever.
Yeah, and I always feel like if I dedicate more than 3 minutes to not actually doing work or doing something that has dual purpose. So for me, the walking meditations are great. I mean, look, the bottom line is everybody deserves to feel a little more content, a little happier. Headspace is the meditation made simple. Go to headspace.com/majority. That's headspace.com/majority for a free 1-month trial. You get access to Headspace full library of meditations for every situation, so you can try them out. This is the best deal offered right now. Head to headspace.com/majority today. All right, want to welcome our guest. He is a journalist. He is a Strike Wave editorial collective member and author of Blood Red Lines, How Nativism Fuels the Right. Brendan O'Connor, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me on.
So let's start with, what you describe here is the notion of borders as not simply a line that demarks two countries, but has it's both tangible, but it's legal, etc. Explain that concept to us.
Sure. Yeah. So I think that what we need to understand, particularly in this context, is that the border, it has a function. Like you said, it separates, one sovereign nation state from another. But particularly in the context of the U.S. border with Mexico, it's a tool for managing the flow of labor and the flow of workers and the flow of people. And as such, it is something that in very real material ways is not just a geographic location. And you can hear this in the way that especially politicians and other figures on the right talk about the border and talk about that every state is a border state. And this is framed in terms of expanding the immigration apparatus to be a nationwide thing. It's not just about apprehending people making the border crossing. But it's getting at a deeper truth that there is a way of managing and surveilling people that has been perfected at the border, but that is applied everywhere.
And it's also about sort of creating multiple tiers of, citizenship is just, it's obviously just a construct, right? I mean, it's actually creating multiple tiers of human beings, essentially. And also you can look at that through the sort of, I guess, the planes of both citizenship, but also workers and just sheer humans.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, one of the things that became most clear to me in the course of my research and reporting on this book is that the kind of nativist impulse to protect citizenship and protect a kind of particularly racialized white idea of citizenship is not actually in opposition to the interests of capital and the industries that need migrant labor. These things actually work together, and it serves the interests of the employers who rely on migrant labor to have a kind of robust nativist politics that marginalizes and makes a particular layer of workers especially vulnerable and especially exploitable. And the fact that there are millions of workers in this country who exist in a state of deportability and whose families are under this threat, even if those families are of mixed citizenship status, this has a paralyzing effect on people's ability to live, people's ability to organize, people's ability to stand up for themselves in exploitative conditions. And so these things really work together in complicated and sometimes apparently contradictory ways. But that is, it's an important thing to keep in mind.
Let's just examine that contradiction, because the contradiction is between this sort of notion of like a fear on the sort of nativist right. And, when we're talking about this, and we'll get into sort of the taxonomy a little bit, but broadly speaking, we know the different types of groups we're talking about here who express that, ranging from Congressman Steve Scalise, who we just played a clip of, through the Proud Boys into, whatever it is, the 3%ers. So you have that nativism, which is, we're being replaced in some way, and it's also racialized, of course. But then you also have this business desire for cheap labor, as you say. And this is all, and these interests fit under one umbrella. You also refer to this concept of border fascism. Just explain this contradiction more and how, you've touched on it, but how it resolves itself in the context of essentially the right.
Sure. So, I think that kind of we are entering a period right now where this contradiction is increasingly unstable, and it has been resolved in a particular way in the context of the Republican Party over the past half a century or so, where the kind of logic of the racialized logic of citizenship and nation building was subordinated to the interests of capital, the interest of business, the interests of industry. And what I call border fascism is the process of and the emergence of a political logic where that is sort of inverted, and the interests of race making and the anxiety and the fear over replacement and so-called white genocide is taking on greater momentum, greater influence, and is able to exert itself against the interests of capital that it has kind of been playing second fiddle to. In the course of in the course of the Trump administration, I think that what we saw was that ultimately the establishment Republican Party, the donor class, the interests of capital kind of remained in the driver's seat. But I think a large amount of the instability that we're seeing, the fracturing of the Republican Party, can be ascribed to this contradiction no longer sort of being as stable as it once was.
That's fascinating. There's a word for that, or there's two words for it. It's called Tucker Carlson.
I was
Yeah.
That is, that is when Tucker Carlson, all of a sudden people are like, why is this guy like, talking about corporate elites? And it is an indication of a shift in the sort of the equilibrium that had been established. I mean, and I think this first like sort of reared its head, it seems to me, back in, I think it was 2004, maybe it was, or 2005, when there was an attempt by the Bush administration to forge an immigration policy. Karl Rove was convinced that they need to get on the right side of immigration in some fashion to for their electoral chances going forward. And there was such a massive pushback by the talk radio right, which I think, sort of is the sort of, the better, the public facing part of some of these undercurrents that you write about here. And that was sort of the first indication that like they're not going to go quietly on this, and they have amassed a tremendous amount of power.
And then Trump got elected. But it's hard to know what the cause and effect is, right? That's a feedback loop on some level. And so what is it in your mind? And we'll get to, we have so much to get to in terms of your book, but what is it in your mind that has shifted that equilibrium? Like, why do we have Tucker Carlson saying this, whereas, 20 years ago, it was John Kasich on there saying we need to worry about business interests?
Right. Yeah, no, that's kind of the operative question, because you're right that there are antecedents, and, these forces didn't just come from nowhere, but obviously something has changed to allow them to gain as much influence and prominence as they have. And I think that one big part of this is the broader hegemonic crisis of neoliberal capitalism that we are all kind of in one way or another trying to figure out and respond to. Neoliberal capitalism, as built and established and perpetuated by both the Democratic and Republican parties, has, been a way to protect the interests of capital and allow it to move freely around the world, kind of smoothly across borders. And this is at the same time that, borders are being militarized, that borders are being locked down, and that domestic white workers in the US are seeing their industries collapse. And this kind of reached a crisis point in 2007, 2008. And that, I think, has reopened a window for this particular nativist kind of politics to gain traction. And to make a challenge to the dominant way of managing and organizing society that the Republican Party and the Democratic Party have embraced over the past 4 decades.
You have you also have this sort of I guess, like, this ties in on some level to demographic anxiety. But that demographic anxiety is associated in some respects with the loss of power for labor. I mean, it's an interesting. I think this is this is an issue that we talk about on this program quite a bit, right? And how does the loss of economic power, or in this instance, just even the institutions of labor that used to provide the economic power for a broad array of folks, how does that end up creating or enhancing demographic anxiety? Will you talk about that dynamic?
Yeah, so I think that one answer to that might be that in the absence of the kinds of institutions and organizations like the labor movement that might offer a way for people to access different kinds of identity and different kinds of solidarity with people unlike themselves in whatever way. There's a retreat to identity, and there's a retreat to racial identity. I actually don't think that there's been a lot of discourse about the kind of disaffected white working class and the effects of deindustrialization, and that's not to be dismissed. But I don't really think that is kind of the primary base for the nativist politics that I describe in my book. I think that those are people that are, recruited into this political project, and an appeal is made to them. But this doesn't originate necessarily with the factory worker who in the industrial Midwest who's out of a job now.
Go ahead.
Well, you trace it back to 1970s, like population control discourse, and how that plays into environmental discussions now. And we just mentioned Tucker Carlson, but he's going on his program basically saying population overcrowding, and that's going to result in catastrophic environmental consequences, etc. Can you talk about the mirroring really of that discourse from that you highlight in your book to what we're seeing today, because it's so prescient based on the nativism of somebody like Tucker Carlson and his section of the right wing?
Yeah, I mean, I think we see that this is a way for, not that Tucker necessarily needs to figure out like how to be more palatable. Like he's sort of very much leaning into his vulgar racism, but to talk about overpopulation, to talk about the effect of kind of too many people are like littering and making green spaces dirty, is a way of, I think, sublimating certain kinds of racial anxiety for a more liberal milieu. And this is, there's a line, like you said, that can be drawn back to the early environmentalist and conservationist movements of the late 60s and early 70s, from which people like John Tanton and Cordelia Scaife-May, who I write about extensively in this book, emerged, and whose experiences in those movements informed their cultivation of the nativist nonprofits and think tanks that they founded and developed, and that then provided personnel and policy for the Trump administration. I think that, we've seen a split. This is not to say necessarily that like environmentalism is racist or something like that. And in fact, John Tanton very explicitly was like, these people aren't racist enough for me, all the way back in the 70s. But that there is a history of a kind of ambivalence and a kind of intermingling in these movements of some pretty dangerous ideas.
Let's get into Tanton and Scaife, or I guess Scaife-May, but I think the Scaife is sort of like the sort of the operative part of that,
Yeah.
in terms of what fuels this. I mean, why did you? I mean, you focused really. I mean, these are your two protagonists in the book that are there in terms of driving this particular, I guess, coexistence of what appears to be contradictory impulses on some level. Why those two? And then, tell us about them individually, but why these two? Did you pick these two?
Yeah, so I mean, kind of working backwards, at the beginning of the Trump administration, I was interested to try and see, like, where are the people that Trump is making, where the political appointees in Department of Homeland Security and its various affiliated agencies, like, where are these people coming from? Who is carrying out the Trump, Stephen Miller, Steve Bannon kind of anti-immigrant agenda? And what I found was that there was a network of nonprofits, three primary ones: the Federation for American Immigration Reform, Center for Immigration Studies, and Numbers USA, that have been around for many, many years, kind of at the periphery of the Republican Party, who during Trump's campaign gained a lot of influence and provided many of these political appointees. And in looking at the history of these organizations, I found that they were all either founded by or cultivated by this guy, John Tanton, who had a very close relationship with Cordelia Scaife May, the younger sister of Richard Scaife, who, you know, she was a millionaire heiress to the Scaife and Mellon fortunes, and basically was his benefactor, and provided him with tons of money over the years to create these organizations that essentially launder or put a kind of pseudo-intellectual veneer on just rank classically American anti-immigrant nativist sentiment, but really, you know, put it in translated into terms that can be put into policy, which is what we saw in the Trump administration.
I have to say, like, you know, it's not hard for me to imagine you have, you know, having written like maybe the story, like a story of a much more benign sort of, you know, artist who has a benefactor and just making beautiful paintings, and this, you know, but instead it's just that Tanton creates all of this sort of just machines to pump out hate. In fact, you know, before we played the Scalise clip, I was like, when was the last time like anything in the news has come up about Migrant Caravan? And I can tell you it was about 2.5 weeks ago, and you can find it on the Center for Immigration Studies, reporting on Migrant Caravan that's forming. And so just to give folks an example, and then this gets laundered through the various right-wing channels, and there it is. So, like, give us a sense of, all right, so Tanton, you know, develops these institutions. Give us a sense of sort of this world. You've got the think tanks, if you will, in the form of Center for Immigration Studies and other things. Who's using this material? I mean, we saw it being put to use in the context of the Trump administration, but on the ground, like, give us a taxonomy of these different groups that you have also done a lot of reporting on. Right.
Yeah, so there are, you know, there are some kind of, there's not as much, I think, direct overlap between the sort of elite policy sphere of the, you know, of these movements, and the street-based organizations like the Proud Boys, or not all street. Many of them are very online. You know, the so-called alt-right. There are some connections. So, for example, the chairman of the Proud Boys, a guy named Enrique Terrio, was a very high-ranking volunteer on the Trump campaign. He was the director of Latinos for Trump in Florida. And so, you know, there are sort of, you know, specific instances where there are people who kind of bridge the divide. But for the most part, at least in recent years. These have been, I think, pretty, organizationally separate phenomena, but they are responding to the same kind of political conditions and drawing on similar legacies and traditions in American politics, but kind of going about the way that they approach and practice their politics in different ways.
Do we know if the financing is that different? I mean, like I've always wondered, how Gavin McInnes had those shows at one point, and Gavin McInnes was the former head of the Proud Boys. At one point, he invited me onto a show that he was trying to do, in sort of as like his comeback tour. I can't remember if this was one or two. It must have been like 2 or 3 years ago. And he offered me $5,000 to go on his show.
Wow. And
it is literally like a 20-minute drive from here. He was going to send me a car. And I'm thinking to myself, there's no, being in this business, there's no formula where that he gets that $5,000 back. And now maybe he was just self-financing it, but my sense is you look at like some of these right-wing outlets, there's a lot of money sloshing around there. I don't know if it comes from Scafe necessarily, but you've got these sort of parallel tracks that are just doing sort of like the haute racism and the low racism. and they're proceeding along, and they're in sync on some level.
I think that's correct. I would also love to know where the money, where Gavin's money is coming from. Like, you're right that there is a massive media ecosystem for this that to me remains pretty opaque. And I think to a lot of folks who are reporting on this is that, that story hasn't yet totally been told. I know that, Scafe May in the last years of her life did give a fair amount of money to many of the kind of like early aughts right-wing blogosphere, the kind of antecedents to the alt-right, but it's not a ton. It wasn't like a ton of money, and I think that's very much an open question. But the scarier thing to me is that it might actually, and I think the likeliest thing to me is that it is some combination of, there might be some pretty substantial donors, whether it's the Mercers or Peter Thiel, like these are good candidates that are possibly involved. But I think it's also likely that there is a good amount of grassroots fundraising that's going on, that there is an audience for this, and there are people that are willing to give their money to support these kinds of projects. Like you said, it's not enough to earn back that $5,000, but like it's not, this isn't something being conjured out of nothing.
Right. I mean, I like I've said in the past, if someone was to give me $100,000 worth of Facebook ads, that's all I need. And I'll see, and then I become self-perpetuating at that point. And that, I think, is, there's a lot of seed money out there, I think, is what it gets you to a certain point in, in those type of industries that sort of like, like it gets you up into orbit, and then you sort of drift through there. So give us a sense of like the taxonomy of these different groups, and particularly, I mean, let's talk about it in the context of what happened at the Capitol. And then I want to talk about where you think it's headed now, because, we've watched when we were talking about the Scalise clip, we were talking about like, they've run through, they didn't get that much traction with Mr. Potato Head or with, and, we're too far away for Christmas, for the war on Christmas. They need to talk about something. There is no more policy. And it seems to me that like, immigration and racism, that's sort of where they'll land.
Yeah. So just to speak briefly about the taxonomy of the far right and the kind of grassroots organizations of the far right. During the Trump years, we saw a kind of explosion and a proliferation of many different groups kind of putting up different banners and saying, that like we kind of trying to make a claim to being the sort of leading organization. And after Heather Heyer's murder in Charlottesville and various kinds of internal movement infighting and drama, many of those groups collapsed. And the Proud Boys, Gavin McInnes, the organization that Gavin McInnes founded, as ostensibly as a social drinking club for men, which was for a long time kind of a laughingstock of other groups on the far right, and was not, frankly, taken seriously by many journalists who cover the far right or anti-fascist organizers and activists. Kind of stepped into the organizational power vacuum and became the home base for a lot of folks. It came to function, I think, as a sort of big tent far right organization. And over the past 2 years or so, has really established itself as a militant, robust organization that can turn people out. In some parts of the country, it has bigger bases of support than others. But this really came to a head on January 6th in Washington, D.C., where it seems clear now that Proud Boys, along with some other organized factions like the Oath Keepers and various kinds of militia organization, older militia groups, were basically the sort of organized cadre moving among the sort of masses of Trump supporters and providing leadership in this moment of chaos and kind of providing direction for people. Most of the people that participated in January 6th and most of the people that have been subsequently charged are not members of organized groups. But the role that these organized groups played is clearly very significant. And I don't think that we would have gotten that without the, events of the past few years.
What do you think? I mean, and to the extent that you have to speculate, obviously it's speculation, but maybe you've come across this in your reporting. What do you think for those who were part of the organized groups, right? I mean, there are some. I don't know if it was, we spoke to Robert Pape at one point, and they're still having arrests and whatnot. So these figures, but they're, 10, 15% of those people were from organizations, at least. What do you think their agenda was? Do you have a sense of like how, like, how serious they were as to what they thought was going to happen?
I think they were looking for people to hurt. I don't think that they had any aspirations to, taking over the machinery of the federal government and, exerting themselves on the levers of power. I think they were looking for opportunities to do violence and make a spectacle of it. I think that ultimately is what their politics boil down to. And so, I think you saw this when they reached the inner sanctum of the House of Representatives and kind of didn't really know what to do with themselves because there was nobody there. So yeah, I think their agenda was to hurt people.
I mean, I ask only because, well, maybe, I don't know. it's all secondhand. But I think that they actually thought when they got there that there was other things that were going to happen that they may not have had. I'm not convinced that they were obviously mistaken, and I think there was a tremendous amount of delusion. But I think they thought they were going to bring about some actual change in the outcome of the election. I really, I think some of them actually did that. And I don't know that they knew what the steps were, what the mechanics were. I think they just felt like we need to get to point A. And once we do, everything will happen after that. Mm-hmm. But I don't have firsthand knowledge of that, and so I will leave it at that.
Well,
but
I just curious too, because I know you touch on in your book on Peter Thiel and the fact that he conducted raids during his time of people in his workplace. That was something that I hadn't heard about at all. Before we let you go, I was wondering if you could just touch on that.
Wait, sorry, say that again?
Oh, I'm sorry. Maybe this was in some of my notes. Maybe this was from something else. So go on, Sam.
It's all right. Okay, so lastly, all right. So where did they go now? Like, where does this energy? And I imagine part of it is contingent upon Trump, but where does this go?
Yeah, like you said, it's largely contingent on Trump, and I think that what I mean when I say that is that it's contingent on kind of the ongoing power struggle within the Republican Party. If the Republican Party is brought back into the kind of, or rather, what we're seeing, okay, so let me back up. What we're seeing subsequent to January 6th is a massive federal crackdown on the participants in the siege and the riot. We're seeing the federal government kind of reasserting its legitimacy, its authority. A line was clearly crossed. But to the extent that these people feel that there is a home for them within the Republican Party, within the kind of ongoing political struggle in the mainstream, sort of above ground. I think that actually puts a kind of limit on the influence of the currents and the factions and the tendencies within this movement that are saying to people, Trump lost. You believed that he was going to kind of come in on a white horse over the horizon and save the day, but that didn't happen. Your analysis was all wrong. Actually, this whole process of American democracy is a scam, is a fraud, and there is no political solution to your problems. We are providing, a movement that can answer your problems and can provide an explanation for how the world works. But it requires you to sort of disavow Trump, disavow the Republican Party, disavow even the semblance of democracy, and embrace this neo-fascist tendency that is still sort of stalking the outskirts of our politics, and that I don't think is going away anytime soon.
How agnostic is that to partisan politics? Because when you talk about this sort of neo-fascist movement disengaging from democracy, disengaging from the Republican Party, disengaging from Trumpism, and it's out there, and it's at its heart, it is, the political system is not going to provide redress for your complaints. If I just stop it there, and don't even talk about a positive agenda per se. And I don't mean positive as in, happy, but I mean,
no, I know what you mean.
But then I can start to appeal to disaffected people across the ideological spectrum, right? I mean,
right, but it doesn't stop there. I mean, the message is, the message is in service of the establishment of a white ethno state, of the purging of anyone but the chosen few. And this, the message is there is no political solution. The only solution is to disengage from really like society, and retreat to violence in defense of yourself, in defense of your family, and in defense of people who look like you. And that's the only thing that can be counted on in this worldview. And I think that that makes the idea that there are any links or connections or coalitions or ways to like reach across this divide. It makes it very clear to me that no, this is going in a very different direction.
So that, I mean, in that respect, you're saying it's going to get even more marginal, but possibly more dangerous.
I think that is one likely possibility.
What's the other? I mean, I guess the only reason why I asked that is because, there is, there does exist in some quadrants of the left I don't want to say a nihilism, but maybe, but a disaffection that if you don't bring in that explicit, ethno-nationalism, it's just, some form of nationalism. I mean, that's what strikes me when I see Tucker Carlson, when he's talking about the elite and the corporatists and, the professional class, that he's trying to make an appeal to elements on the left that also have that same sort of sense of like the political system is not going to redress my issues. And, it might be at one point like, hey, by the time I got to the fourth meeting, I realized, wait a second, these guys are white. But, the former head of the Proud Boys, Latino. And so, it doesn't, maybe it's not, it may take a while before that becomes explicit to people.
Yeah. I mean, so just to say the other option is that if the other option is that the Republican Party becomes an explicitly ethno-nationalist party that is abandoned by most of the sectors of capital that support it. Maybe parts of tech still remain involved, parts of the defense industry still remain involved. But if you have a national party that can contest elections, that can govern, and this is the trajectory that the party has taken for 60 years, is towards minoritarian rule, then it's hard to make the case that there is no political solution. In fact, there is a party that is very open to thinking about politics in this way. I would also say that the fascist political tradition for over 100 years has achieved its dynamism by stealing and appropriating left rhetoric and parts of left political analysis. It is, fascism is something that emerges from the crisis of capitalism, but it is not an anti-capitalist movement. But it does take on sort of like anti-bourgeois discourse and language, and is able to sort of offer an analysis of capitalism, which liberalism really doesn't, and conservatism really doesn't. And so you're absolutely right that people like Tucker Carlson on the right, and then there are people who at least position themselves on the left that want to claim that there is common cause to be made here. But this was just history repeating itself. Like, there's nothing new about that. That also happened during fascism's classical period. But that, I think, is deeply naive and just wrong.
Brendan O'Connor, the book is Blood Red Lines: How Nativism Fuels the Right. Fascinating stuff. Thank you so much for your time today. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
All right, folks, quick break. Right back. Finish it up. Well, folks, that is just about it for us today. That was fascinating, fascinating analysis, and I have to say the Scafes, they really did a job on the country. A couple of choice folks with hundreds of millions of dollars and time on their hands can really do some damage to a nation and its psyche. But that is it for us today. For Emma and I, we will see you tomorrow. And we will also see you now.
Hello.
Yep. Here we are. All right, folks, going to head into the fun half. 646-257-3920 is the number. We will take your phone calls. We will take your IMs. You can IM the show via the app. Pick that up at majorityapp.com, completely free. Of course, we have all sorts of tracking devices on there, and we sell that money, sell that data to hedge funds.
Obviously.
So they can figure out where to put shopping malls and whatnot. But
are those still a thing anymore?
Shopping malls? Well, I don't know. A CVS or whatever it is, a Walgreens or wherever we're going to put that. Tomorrow on the program, we are going to... Matt just saw that. Yeah, no, it was a good question. I can't remember what it was. Tomorrow on the program, we're going to go over the specifics on this COVID-19 bill. The worst parts about it are what is not in it, which is different from past bills, where some of the worst parts about it are what the bill does in terms of like giving carte blanche to corporations and to sort of juice wealth inequality. This is a slightly different dynamic where there was an opportunity to get a minimum wage in there, which the worst part about it not being in there is it is hard to imagine a better opportunity to raise it. And it desperately needs to be raised.
Yeah, they're turning their sights on infrastructure now, and I just doubt that the minimum wage is going to be included in that bill.
I still contend that what we're going to end up seeing is some type of Republican compromise that ends up around $11. I am not promoting that. That is a prediction and analysis. Just a reminder, this program relies on your support. You can become a member at jointhemajorityreport.com. When you do, you get you not only support the free show, you also get it free of commercials, and you make this show possible. It's our members that keep us going day in, day out. Jointhemajorityreport.com. Also, don't forget the AM Quickie. And you can find that at amquickie.com and justcoffee.coop. Fair trade coffee, tea, or chocolate. Use the coupon code majority, get 10% off. And just a reminder, I meant to tell you this yesterday, but don't forget, Hunt a Killer. It's the murder mystery subscription in a box. That's the most exciting date night you can do at home. Hunt a Killer brings people together by challenging them to decode ciphers, examine clues, and solve puzzles. It's like an escape room delivered right to your door. You can do this over Zoom too. You can have people. You don't have to even have to be in the same place. Right now, you can go to huntakiller.com/majority. Use the promo code majority for 20% off your first box. Again, make sure to use the code majority for a 20% discount. Today on the Nomi Key Show, we have Janice Dean on the program. She called on lawmakers to begin the impeachment process against Governor Andrew Cuomo, both as a function of the now 6 women who have alleged that he has been, that he sexually harassed them, and over the cover-up or alleged cover-up of thousands of nursing home deaths in New York. So check it out. Janice Dean on the Nomi Key Show. You can find that at youtube.com/the Nomi Key Show or on twitch.tv/the_Nomi Key_show. And of course, shout out to the Twitch stream.
Yeah. 5.
Tier 5.
5, slamma-jammas for you. Right?
Tier 5 operator or something like that.
She'll get there. Slamma-jammas.
S tier is what you need to say. That's the gamer speak. You're the S tier.
I know, but I'm just going to keep making up Twitch terms until I've
to stumble on
the right
or
one.
Actually launch one. That could happen.
No thanks.
Matt Leck, speaking of Twitch, what's happened in the Leckian media universe?
Yeah, last night I was on the This Is Revolution podcast with Jason and Pascal. We talked about sports gentrification. I got to tell a couple of my favorite stories. One is about Ralph Engelstad, the casino-owning Nazi who was a donor to the UND Fighting Sioux hockey team name. He was specifically a donor to that name to try to get it to stay. And I also got to talk about how Satchel Paige was playing on an integrated baseball team in Bismarck, North Dakota, a dozen years before Jackie Robinson. And a lot of people don't know that story, including most North Dakotans, because I didn't know growing up in Bismarck. That's the story that we don't really tell there. It's unfortunate, but there's a good book about it, so I talked a little bit about that. So This Is Revolution podcast on YouTube. I was on the live stream last night.
I'd be curious about that just because, like the University of North Dakota, their hockey program's pretty storied, right?
Yeah. Yep. And he was one of the big donors to it. And he said, I'll give you all this money if you make sure to keep the name even after I die and put the logo all over it in like granite and stuff. And ultimately he did die and they removed the name. So sucks to be him.
That's what I was that's the kind of story I like. Sorry, bud.
Yeah.
All right. Oh, don't forget, check out The Antifada. You can find it at patreon.com/The Antifada. See you in the fun half.
In for it.
All right, folks, 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half.
Are you ready?
Who sent us this?
Alpha males are back, boys back, and the alpha males are back.
Just as delicious as you can imagine.
The alpha males are back, boys back, and the alpha males are back.
Just wanna degrade the white man.
Alpha males are back.
I take all of it in my throat.
Alpha males are back.
Almost has what?
The alpha males are back, 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 back.
You are a madman!
And the alpha males are back, back, back.
I am a total cunt.
Can we bring back DJ Dannerky's song, please?
Yeah, or a couple of them. Just put them in rotation.
DJ Dannerky.
Well, the problem with those is they're like 45 seconds long, so I don't know if they're enough of a break for people.
That's fucking nonsense.
Hey, folks, reminder.
I do not have Parkinson's.
And the alpha males are
Psych. Fuck them. Fuck them. Almost has what? Almost says what? Hell of a lot of bank. 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 Hell of a lot of bank.
All lives matter. Have you tried doing an impression on a college campus?
I think that there's no reason why reasonable people across the divide can't all agree with this. Psych.
And the alpha males are back, 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 back. And the Africans are black, 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 black Africans. And the alpha males are back, 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 back. And the Africans are black, 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 black.
When you see Donald Trump out there, doesn't a little part of you think that America deserves to be taken over by jihadists? Keep it at 100. Can't knock the hustle. Come on. Fuck them. Fuck them. Fuck things I do for the bigger game plan. By the way, it's my birthday. Happy birthday to me, Jew boy. I have a thought experiment for you.
And the alpha males are back, back. Africans are black, black. Alpha males are back, back. Africans are black, black.
Come on. Come on. Come on. Someone needs to pay the price for blasphemy around here.
I am a total pussy.
We are back, ladies and gentlemen. It is the fun half on Wear White to Work Wednesday.
Not on camera yet. Just give me a second.
I think people remember. People remember that.
It's not Wear White to Work Wednesday. It's White Shirt Wednesday. Get it right.
I don't know. I might change it to White to Work Wednesday.
Because it sounds like right to work.
No, just that way. It feels more universal that people can.
Sounds more racialized.
So somebody wrote. Wait, shoot, where did that go? Oh, here it is. It was something like I can't find the. Oh, here it is. Be careful, Sam. Emma's wearing similar clothes and picking up your habits of mispronunciations now. If she comes in with your haircut tomorrow, she'll have gone full Jennifer Jason Leigh in single white female.
Yeah, perhaps. I think I'd look a lot like Rachel Maddow.
Well, I mean, that actually is what Michael used to call me. So.
Right. Yeah. Actually, I remember that. I got a message from Kyle saying I should say this word. Poggers.
Poggers. There you go. Yep. That's big on the Twitch stream.
I don't know why I hate it. Like I don't like it's like something I don't understand. So I feel, angry about it.
Well, that is not the best approch to things you don't understand. You should probably just be more open, go in and get into the Twitch stream and mix it up
this is
in
part
there.
Of my, I got to work on myself, I guess.
Calling from an 818 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from? Oh, you know what? You're in there, but I am not.
Yeah, he probably can't hear you anymore.
I saw a funny I am. Can I read it? Just really quick.
Yeah, sure. Hold on 1 second.
Yeah.
818, are you there?
Hey, it's Dave from Jamaica. How you guys doing?
Dave from Jamaica. I'm sorry about that. I went in there and I hadn't even I put you in but hadn't called in yet. How are you, Dave? What's on your mind
I'm
today?
not too bad. Not too bad. I'm glad I got on Poggers. So
boom.
to oh yeah, sorry. So what I was going to call in today about is it was what the caller from yesterday, who should be hired by the Tushy company, but what he was talking about when it comes to kind of dealing with lots of the messes that first world countries kind of put the modern world. Sorry,
Sammy from Iraq, just to remind people.
Yeah,
Did we
Sammy
cut
from-
that clip, Matt?
Yeah, it was on the list. I'm not sure if we did cut it because there's a bunch on there, but I can.
Okay.
Get a second pass.
Paying him. The Tushy company should be paying them. But all right, back to the point he was making about if there is to be like a leftist type foreign policy, and he kind of brought some things to mind I was thinking about. While ideally you shouldn't be interfering in other countries' politics, but like for the cases of if there's a genocide going on or so on and so forth, having like a stronger UN, which is not like controlled by the whims of who's on the Security Council. Because I think the current issue with the UN is like you have those major nations that kind of veto stuff if they feel like. But the trick is, how do you get a powerful nation to kind of give up its power in a way? That's the part I can't seem to figure out, because it's contrary to what I've seen throughout history.
Yeah. I mean, that is the dilemma. I mean, that is, and that goes hand in hand with the dilemma of like, we as a nation have some form of responsibility for, lack of a better term, some form of reparations, or at the very least, some form of reparations, I guess, the easiest way to say it. And
and I just want to say, a lot of that, the only way for us to really go backwards in this area is for leadership to put handcuffs on itself, in a sense, in a good way, right? Biden's considering adjusting the authorization for use of military force, but part of the issue is that Obama didn't really curtail substantively what the executive can do in terms of war. And that just leaves things open. It's really hard to put the toothpaste back in the tube, so to speak, when it comes to unleashing American military force and capabilities without real oversight.
I kind of been milling around my head, like, ideally first world nations had a more lenient, especially asylum and immigration policy that can help things. That way you're not interfering with the complicated internal politics of a country. And if there's like a persecuted minority, they have a place to go, right? Because I think that's, if memory serves, during World War II, the Jews were able to escape Germany at some point, and lots of them got turned back. I guess that's my view of it. Like, if there's a way for first world nations to help without interfering in politics, maybe changing their immigration policy might be one of those things.
Right.
Yeah, but again, that's what we're seeing with just tweaks here, as opposed to like the point we made about, yes, is Biden attempting to be more benevolent on immigration? Sure. But without radical change and abolishing ICE and basically demilitarizing our immigration processes, that's not going to happen in any way that changes, except for temporarily. The next Republican president, there will be one, will just use the same structures to do the same atrocities.
Good point. Well, sorry to be a bit of a downer here, but thanks for let me have a word to say.
Thanks for the call, Dave.
No problem.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Calling from a 647 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hi, this is Warren from Toronto.
Warren from Toronto. What's on your mind?
Yeah, so I guess I'm getting a bit technocratic here. But there used to be an article in Jacobin, and it called to attention ISDS, Investor State Dispute Settlement, and the current lawsuit that's pursuing in regards to the Keystone Pipeline again. And I think this is something that should definitely get more attention, especially because someone like Biden, who we know we can't really trust to fight, this is just going to be an excuse for Biden to kind of just, roll over. So I wanted your thoughts on that, and if there's been any news from the Biden administration from, somehow fighting against ISDS or removing it from our trade agreements.
All right. So just to be clear with everybody, I appreciate the call. Let me just, and I don't know the specific lawsuit involving the Keystone Pipeline. It doesn't surprise me. I appreciate the call. And this was a big issue in the context of the TPP, which is the Trans-Pacific Partnership. And it's also exists this investor state dispute, ISDS. I can't remember what it stands for just 30 seconds ago. But essentially what it is these bilateral and multilateral trade agreements, and really it's not really about trade as much as it is about sort of it doesn't open up any new products. It really is just sort of creating sort of a context of providing for an opportunity where it really impinges upon the sovereignty of countries. I mean, this is, and I can't remember his name now. Slobodan, was that his name?
Slobodian.
We had him on about international neoliberalism, and when I say neoliberalism, I'm actually talking about like the actual neoliberals, Mont Pelerin, and the idea that they had of diminishing the sovereignty of nations. And by this, we mean you've got the way that the Keystone Pipeline folks, they were anticipating X number of dollars of profit from their pipeline that was going to get this dirty tar sand oil, and it was going to ship it down through the United States to a refinery, and then they would sell it. And so they're anticipating a certain amount of profits. When they are prevented from, and they're making some case as to why they shouldn't have been prevented from doing this, well, they don't get a permit because it has to cross the border, and the State Department rejected it. When they are prevented from making these profits, they don't go to court in the U.S. or in Canada. They go to a tribunal, essentially, that is staffed by, more often than not, industry lawyers. Don't know the exact numbers of the people on it. It's sort of contingent upon I'm sure there's, somewhere deep in NAFTA, and the new NAFTA, it's in there. And they go and they make their argument as to how much profit they lost, and the offending country, could also be a state, like literally a state in the United States, has to pay that money if they don't allow for their product to be sold. So for instance, if Massachusetts said, we're not going to, obviously just a hypothetical, we're going to outlaw Canadian maple syrup because it is, we have established a new law that says you can only have X amount of this heavy metal in syrup. I don't know that there's heavy metal in syrup, but I'm just, speculating. This is hypothetical. And that change in their regulatory structure then says Canadian maple syrup cannot be sold in Massachusetts. The Canadian maple syrup manufacturing group can go and sue within the treaty, go to this tribunal and say, we anticipate losing over the next 10 years $50 million in profits. And what this does is, it either the state of Massachusetts has to pay for the right to create their own regulatory structure, or they say, all right, we can't afford to pay it, we'll just sell your stuff here. And so you understand this dynamic. It prevents the citizenry through their government to impose higher worker standards, safety standards, environmental standards, by inhibiting their ability to do so because they will owe projected profits to these corporations. And so this was a big issue in the TPP, and I think people might remember us talking about it. It exists though in old and new NAFTA. It obviously doesn't have as there's not as much impact, largely because Canada and the U.S. do not have such a huge discrepancy in regulations, and because Mexico is not necessarily sending in products that would run afoul of a regulation. But you hear this all the time in terms of like logging or whatever it is. It's not as comprehensive as it was in the TPP. So I don't know the specifics of that, but these devices, essentially, in these trade deals, what they do is they basically prevent people, citizens of countries and smaller countries, from enhancing their protections of the environment, of their citizens, of their workers, of their consumers, and inhibits it because you can't do it without paying a penalty to the people who anticipated a profit under the current regime. That's basically it. It's
nuts. I mean, I remember that provision in the TPP, which blew my mind. And thankfully, the elevated level there never came to pass. But that was always embedded in NAFTA, is just the elevation of multinational corporations to a power status that began eclipsing nation states, especially smaller ones.
And what it does is it also sort of like it creates a lowest common denominator, ends up being the baseline. You can't go above that.
Yeah.
And when you're talking about, whatever it was, 15 countries in the Pacific Rim, not all of them necessarily, instead of like them having to raise their standards, like everyone else lowers their protections and whatnot to these other countries. So it's a problem. Yes. We were talking about Tucker today.
He's really been on one recently.
He's really working it. He's got to. I think his
you better work.
His ratings. His ratings were
Britney Spears reference.
His ratings were starting to get a little bit. We're sagging quite a bit, is my understanding. And so
Foxes.
Yep. When in doubt, go back to the wussification. He can take this now because this was Limbaugh's thing, that the U.S. public is being feminized. I mean,
damn, dude, Limbaugh's body's probably not even cold yet.
I know it, and he's stealing it from him. Here is Tucker Carlson.
So we've got new hairstyles and maternity flight suits. Pregnant women are going to fight our wars. It's a mockery of the U.S. military. While China's military becomes more masculine as it's assembled the world's largest navy, our military needs to become, as Joe Biden says, more feminine, whatever feminine means anymore, since men and women no longer exist. The bottom line is it's out of control, and the Pentagon's going along with this. Again, this is a mockery of the U.S. military and its core mission, which is winning wars. One of the few people who's been paying attention to this is someone who served in the U.S. military, Indiana Congressman Jim Banks.
Yes, here we go.
Tucker, what happened to your anti-interventionist, pro-peace stance? Well, obviously, his claim is that he doesn't want to intervene in foreign wars because they're all monkeys and they're primitive and we shouldn't debase ourselves by involving ourselves in our affairs. But now he's talking about how the military needs to be as strong as China's because look at what's happening over there.
But he's not saying strong. I mean, because you can have
as hot,
a feminine, strong military.
Not
he is
by
talking
Tucker's
about.
view.
He is pushing the idea just that. I mean, this is just age old, right? Like we are being feminized as a country. And the masculine nature of our military is being demeaned. It is It is the sort of vapor version of transphobia. Maybe it's not that vaporized. He's talking about like what if, to the extent that, women exist anymore. This is just more of the same from Tucker Carlson. I mean, I remember distinctly, I would imagine long time listeners remember a caller that we had on Air America. His name was Dewey. And Dewey would call in, and he called in one day, and he was enraged at Dick Durbin, who was calling, I think, at that time, for us to get out of Iraq, because he wore a pink tie on the floor of the Senate.
That's gay.
And he said our enemies are laughing at us because of how feminine we are.
Like when Obama ate that hot dog or the hamburger with mustard, although I guess that was elitist. I'm sorry.
Right.
Sean Hannity. But I am fascinated by the interloping of China in all of this, because this is one of my new pet projects of trying to pay attention to, is independent of, yes, I mean, I think calling out the at the very least cultural genocide that China's doing to the Uyghur Muslims there, that's a separate issue that people like Tucker Carlson aren't interested in, and people on the right aren't interested in when they ramp up war with China rhetoric. But this is why Biden being tough on China is going to be one of the main arguments deployed by the right, because you can use xenophobia, and you can create a boogeyman, a large adversary of industry specifically. And anti-Asian hatred is on the rise in the United States. So he gets to use the transphobia in that segment. He gets to use anti-Asian biases in that segment. And then it's all culminating in the Biden's not tough enough on China, which we saw in those polling numbers we cited like 2 weeks ago on the show, which being tough on China is in the top 6 or 7 concerns of Republican voters. And when Fox keeps doing this, it's just going to artificially inflate. I'm
skeptical that that's going to gain some traction, some long-term traction.
Because I listen to it and I'm like, that is... our relationship with China is, I think, not in most people I know's concerns, but I'm always trying to be like, yeah, I live in Brooklyn, so there's that.
Right. Here is Tucker Carlson continuing on. He had quite a night last night about the problems of feminization in this country.
In the U.S., Tony Fauci warned Congress that reopening American businesses could cause, quote, coronavirus outbreaks the government may not be able to control. Going outside, Tony Fauci said, was just too risky. Meanwhile, in China, where the coronavirus originated, a top advisor to the Chinese government declared that the country was experiencing a very different kind of threat, a more profound threat. The problem, he said, was a national masculinity crisis. Chinese boys, quote, have been spoiled by housewives and female teachers, and they were becoming, as a result, quote, delicate, timid, and effeminate. In essence, they were becoming people who might listen to someone like Tony Fauci. Left unchecked, said the Chinese government advisor, the feminization of Chinese boys would, quote, inevitably endanger the survival and development of the Chinese nation. In January, China's government acted on this recommendation. The Education Ministry of China released a notice entitled Proposal to Prevent the Feminization of Male Adolescents. The goal was to, quote, cultivate students' masculinity. Have you seen this on other channels, by the way? Kind of interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
No,
meanwhile, he's doing it himself. That's his program. And of course, if you listen to Anthony Fauci, you're feminized in some way. I mean, that's a long way to go for that, but that's where he's going.
And in China, all that really stems from is that men outnumber women in the country significantly. So I think there's a lot of anxiety about traditional masculinity, right? But that's just, I mean, misogyny in another country that Tucker Carlson is taking incredibly seriously in order to make some grander point about the United States' cultural deficiencies. If you like China so much, Tucker, why don't you go live there?
What I love is that he was holding a picture, I don't know who it was, of a Chinese official with a glass of red wine. I mean, come on, man. Where's the beer? You're getting a little bit...
getting a little feminized there.
A glass of Chablis.
Yeah, what's next? A little sherry?
Nothing like saying that you're I mean, that somehow to gender, to apply a to gender the idea of listening to the foremost authority on epidemics in the country. If you do, it's a gendered action on some level. It's just bizarre.
Well, have you seen Dr. Fauci? He's so little petite.
It's true.
You know, that's not men need to be big.
First name, my last name, McKee. On the topic of child payments, cash relief payments from the other day, the American Protestant conservative mentality is wholly unconcerned with whether or not a policy like this will work. It has everything to do with moral worthiness in its subtext. It is essential for the unworthy to suffer. Yes. Lie it. Wait, what your guest said at the end, fascism is a critique of capitalism as well, just from a blame group, divide and conquer, and not a critique of capitalism as a system, is my quick understanding, correct? It is not a systemic critique of capitalism, I think is his point. That I think if I understand what you're saying. Lyot says, I understand poggers. I am angry that I do understand it. I wish I didn't. Don't get sucked into the culture, Emma. The fact that Sam knows this stuff is huge red flags. Get out now. Giga Jeb, do you think at times where there's surplus and a healthy tax code, it's fine to do occasional tax cuts, or just permanently cut certain taxes if it shows that revenue increases? I feel like this is what we're seeing in Europe, with many countries cutting and increasing with surpluses. Cutting and increasing with surpluses. I think the tax code should be, the primary function of the tax code should be to maintain wealth equality, to diminish wealth inequality, secondarily to curb an overheated economy. I don't think that we should have a surplus. I think that's very dangerous, actually, as a government. Moon in the Lake, Sam and Emma, if this bill passes today, how soon do we get our Biden bucks? My understanding is...
By the end of the month, they said?
Well, my understanding is that if you... that it depends on how you file your taxes. Like, in terms of the kids. Like, if you file your taxes electronically, it may just end up in your bank account soon. Otherwise, it will be mailed to you. And it'll either come in the form of a check or in
it's weird because I file my taxes electronically. I got my first stimulus check direct deposit, but the $600 one still hasn't come.
That's weird.
It is weird.
Josh from Tucson. Do you really expect us to believe that White Shirt Wednesday is not planned? White Shirt Wednesday lives on.
We don't really have the ability to be inauthentic about this, so I'm sorry, we're not lying to you. We realized it actually before coming on air this time, though.
Well, I noticed that you were wearing a white sweater. I didn't say anything about it because I was like, that's different enough. At least you're not wearing your glasses. And then I come out of the bathroom and you're wearing your glasses. So that was the problem. Gabriel, hi, Sam. I want to concur with what Sammy had to say yesterday about America's role in fixing the countries it ravaged. While I understand the hesitation to become involved again, because, yes, it might turn into shit again, I think the creative solutions largely revolve around providing material resources and assisting with training of locals to rebuild their countries better, not necessarily bombing, but also not just dumping tons of ready-made goods and then dislocate local producers. Helping with infrastructure and education, to me, is the best way to solve the sins of America's past. Also, Lula Livre, holy shit. Here's the only problem with that. In theory, I like that idea. But in practice, all right, we're going to put 2,000 engineers on the ground and builders on the ground in Iraq, let's say. But wait a second. They're going to get attacked. Then we need to put in a couple of thousand military troops.
Yeah, the issue with this is the delicacy of the fact that we're the ones providing this, and America by nature would be, I think, immediately...
Well, I mean, this is how it escalates, right?
Yeah.
We put the people on the ground. We help there. I understand completely. I don't want to send in products that are going to, due to, let's say, Mexican campesinos, like what we did with corn in NAFTA. So we go there. We provide expertise and aid and support to train and et cetera, and then one incident, and then we've got thousands of military on the ground, and then all of a sudden it's like, well, now we need to chase these people out of the area. And so we start to do offensive maneuvers, and then, off to the races. I mean, that's the problem. Like, in theory, I think this is absolutely right. I just don't know how to execute this in practice without it turning into a shit show.
I gotta read this IM because someone wrote it like maybe 6 times. It's a sports thing.
Okay, go ahead.
But I'll only say it real quick. Rangers legend Jack Johnson. Emma, did you see me score last night at the game? I'm clearly worth that $1 million a year, aren't you? Tell me I'm good. No. Rangers signed a terrible player. And this person, Rangers legend Jack Johnson, has been writing in multiple IMs a day, and I think it's really funny, so I had to acknowledge it.
There you go. The PRO Act passed yesterday in the House, and Joe Biden gave it a full-throated support, and hopefully, maybe it passes in the Senate. I don't see Joe Manchin as a problem with this. Maybe Kristen Sinema, maybe, I don't know. But I don't see Joe Manchin as would have a problem with this. It would be interesting to see what happens and if Joe Biden leans on this. This, we've mentioned this, PRO Act. Well, let's hear Ilhan Omar talk about the PRO Act, because she will explain why the PRO Act is important to American workers.
The gentlelady from Minnesota, Ms. Omar.
The gentlewoman from Minnesota is recognized for 1.5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Speaker, I rise in solidarity with labor unions who, throughout history, have fought the greed of their bosses and corporations in order to have a better life. I rise in solidarity with workers in Marathon Petroleum Plant in Minnesota who are striking for safer working conditions, and with the workers at the Minneapolis Institute of Art, Walker Art Center, and many more workplaces who have recently unionized in my district. I rise in solidarity with the 5,800 mostly Black workers in Alabama who are currently fighting one of the most predatory corporations in the world, Amazon, to form a union. Labor unions have been the driving force for all positive change for workers in modern history. As a former union member myself, I can attest to the power that workers wield when they exercise their right to organize. That's why we need the PRO Act and why we must pass it this week and pressure the Senate to do the same. The PRO Act puts power back where it belongs, in the hands of workers. Thank you, and I yield back. I ask for unanimous consent.
We should say the PRO Act overrides state right-to-work laws in approximately 27 states, maybe. And what it does is it lets people, it requires people working in a union shop where the union is negotiating on their behalf. It requires that they pay agency fees, and to the union. It would give independent contractors and gig workers the right to unionize.
That's one of the biggest for me.
That's huge.
That's huge.
Because it basically says you can't escape unions and collective action by your labor force by, miscategorizing them, or certainly now with that Prop 22, we're going to see a lot of that. It also has tougher penalties for employers who interfere in the efforts of employees to unionize.
Which we're seeing in Amazon on a mass scale, on an unbelievable scale, changing traffic lights in order to stymie unionization, canvassing outside their facilities, holding meetings that all of their employees have to attend, and basically talking about the risks of joining unions, putting up flyers in their bathroom stalls. I mean, it's constant, so this would curtail some of that.
it also calls for immediate, as soon as a worker files with the National Labor Relations Board that an employer is doing something that is retaliatory towards an employee for attempting to unionize, the National Labor Relations Board would immediately and automatically seek an injunction to keep that employee employed. So the burden of proof changes at that point as to, you know, who needs to prove that the company has not retaliated, as opposed to prove that it has. This is animating, this fight for the PRO Act is animating a lot of people in the House. You know, I've said in the past that at one point, like, I would prefer a Tim Ryan to a Nancy Pelosi, in part because the guy is not quite as adept as Pelosi. He is also not considered a progressive, and so it would make it easier for the progressives in the House to leverage their power, I think, where, you know, as opposed to the storyline now, like, why would progressives have an issue with, you know, San Francisco Nancy Pelosi? But
I don't know if that people really think that anymore.
I mean, I think that the mainstream media perceives Pelosi as a progressive. And so what she does ends up being, you know, what she does to oppose her from the left marginalizes those positions on some level. I mean, I
think that's shifted significantly with, like, the public profile of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez.
I think that's true too. But here is Tim Ryan. He is not going to be the Speaker of the House. I think he's going to try and run for
Portman's seat
in the Senate, but we'll see. But here he is making a pretty strong case for the PRO Act. To run for that seat too.
He wanted
it's a little bit of both.
Wanted to make it known.
Mr. Speaker, one of the earlier speakers said, "This is the most dramatic change in labor law in 80 years." And I say, thank God. In the late 70s, a CEO made 35 times the worker. Today, it's 300 to 400 times the worker. And our friends on the other side running around with their hair on fire. Heaven forbid we pass something that's going to help the damn workers in the United States of America. Heaven forbid we tilt the balance that has been going in the wrong direction for 50 years. We talk about pensions, you complain. We talk about the minimum wage increase, you complain. We talk about giving them the right to organize, you complain. But if we were passing a tax cut here, you'd be all getting in line to vote yes for it. Now stop talking about Dr. Seuss and start working with us on behalf of the American workers. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentlemen,
Doesn't he mean Seuss Ghazi?
What's interesting to me about him dropping that in is it shows how ineffective, and I promise you, 15 years ago, the Seuss Gate would be serious stuff, and Democrats wouldn't touch it, and they would have, maybe less, but they would have already come out with a resolution saying, like, we disagree with I mean, honestly, this is what it was.
We're going to censure Dr. Seuss and Ilhan Omar for some reason.
A resolution that, well, there would be no Ilhan Omar. I mean, honestly, the Democratic Party couldn't do it there, but...
well, it was a joke.
I know it was a joke. I know it was a joke.
Messing with you.
But it honestly, like, it is that Tim Ryan is out there from Ohio anticipating a statewide race for the Senate, and he is using Dr. Seuss against them, shows how sort of like feeble that stuff is. Like, it's not the culture war stuff, particularly around this, it's just not going to work. And I just find that
no, it's interesting.
Fascinating.
Again, and now that they have to go back to the well with the caravan thing, I think I haven't seen the right-wing media machine as weak as we're seeing it right now in a long time.
Let's examine this. I mean, Emma has this theory that the right-wing media machine is weak, and they have nothing. They have no ammunition. Okay, I don't know. Let's check in. Let's see what Hannity and Jim Jordan were talking about. I bet you they're going to bring out the big guns for this one.
Charge. Who is in fact the commander-in-chief? Who's running who's making the decisions? The people of this country deserve to know that. Instead, we get this double standard, this idea that they cover for, I think about what the press has done. When it was President Trump, it was kids in cages. Now it's children in holding facilities. With the Democrats defund the police, but now they're putting more police around the Capitol. I mean, even today, we heard about Biden's dog biting someone. Can you imagine if President Trump had a dog at the White House and it bit someone? The press would go crazy. They'd say this dog is working with Russia and we got to have an investigation. So I think the American people deserve to know who's making the decisions. They're also sick and tired of the double standard they see every single day from the mainstream press.
Mark, as I look at these... Jim's absolutely right.
Yeah, imagine if there was a dog that bit somebody and it was Donald Trump.
Well,
it's so unserious. They can't, this is the same thing with, if Dr. Seuss, if they can go for Dr. Seuss, they'll come for you. And, people, I think, are uncertain. Are you doing a bit or is this serious?
I think it's really, they can't grab onto something that is going to resonate. And so now they're going back to the sundowning thing.
Okay, and I'm sorry, they're saying that the left-wing media or the mainstream media would be focusing on Trump's dog if he had one, but he doesn't like pets because obviously he's got a personality disorder. Greg Kelly on Newsmax did a whole segment on Biden's dog. Brendan, that must have been weeks ago, but maybe we have that. They did a whole segment on Biden's dog looking unkempt and saying this is not a handsome dog. Did you see this, Sam?
I did not see
Greg
that.
Kelly,
I didn't know.
One of the leading hosts on Newsmax, did a segment on Biden's dog. And I'm sorry to put you on the spot there, Brendan, but if you have that, they're trying to say, the left-wing media, they would be up in arms about this. And yes, it's a little nauseating how, Jen Psaki's getting questions from reporters what happened to the cat? We heard they're getting a cat. Okay, here we go. Brendan has this.
Did you see the dog? I want to show you something I noticed. Doesn't he look a little rough? I love dogs, but this dog needs a bath and a comb and all kinds of love and care. I've never seen a dog in the White House like this. I remember Buddy. I remember Millie. I remember lots of dogs, but not a dog who seems... I don't know how much love and care he is getting. Let's bring in the historians.
They brought in the historian.
Biden's a dog abuser. This was it was a rescue dog, right? Did they?
Yeah.
They.
Good for them. That's
of course
you should. Sorry, I don't mean to shame breeder getters, but
it is nuts. Matt was just making, the
who's
point that
fixated on dogs? Who's the ones fixated on dogs?
But it's just,
I think it's the right.
But it's just a bizarre. They just can't find what to settle on, and the sundowning thing. Okay, yeah, it's possible. No argument.
Wouldn't be the first time.
Exactly. Yeah. The problem that they have is that all you need to do is pick up a history book or look on the video and see how they handled it with Reagan. And I just, what is it that they anticipate is going to happen after this? I guess it's part of it. It's the radical left that is running, Biden. He's not in control. His dog, it says maybe his dog is controlling what he's doing and has an agenda, but they just can't figure it out. And
they're stuck in a I'm not mad, I'm laughing mode that I think Trump taught them. We're always going to win, except when you actually have lost, that doesn't work anymore.
Yeah, it's hard to own the libs as losers and pathetic when you're the losers.
And it's almost like there's no one there. There's no one there whose brand it is to talk about even policy, and nobody's going to get the attention in that world if they talk about policy. And so they have nothing to deploy. Honestly, 6 years ago, Paul Ryan comes out and he is gonna, what he's gonna say is gonna be total bullshit. But the press is gonna lap it up. And the problem with this is that they have no one to go on to Chuck Todd's program, for instance, and say something that Chuck Todd can.
Oh, that sounds respectable.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. We're deploying the big guns. We're going to send, Jim Jordan onto Chuck Todd's to talk about. He's going to be talking about Seuss and Potato Head, and then he's going to be talking about the dog situation,
the non-existent
and
caravan.
the fact that honestly, there's nothing that.
They have nothing right now. They are scraping the bottom of the barrel. You're so right. And part of this is because, one, the media, I think they took Trump personally. We keep saying this, so they're not letting the Republicans off the hook for Trump, and they're enabling it. These are human beings in this industry, and I genuinely think they took Trump going after the media and the Republican Party following him in that way. They took it personally, and then. To buttress that, the whole deficit conversation surrounding this stimulus package, they can't have that argument because of the tax cuts that they did that bloated the deficit or increased it significantly. And all of the Republican politicians who are the stars right now, too, to what you're saying as the third point, aren't talking about policy anyway. So there's nothing for the Republicans to hang their hat on in terms of media traction that is gonna get any legs right now. They'll find it eventually, but they're treading water at this point.
Let's go to the IMs. Jay Tingle, trouble in paradise? Sam Seder doesn't like having a joke explained. Note to Emma, Vigeland doesn't go back and research some of Michael Brooks' golden moments, or that Brendan Finn doesn't assemble a supercut. Oops, luckily my IMs don't get read on the podcast.
Well, I just enjoy messing with Sam more.
You don't have to take Jay seriously at all.
Is that someone?
Oh yeah, Emma doesn't know who Jay is yet. That's fun.
Who Jay Tingle is yet? So.
I'm sorry.
No, he's just an agitator.
Ah.
He's an agitator.
A left-wing agitator?
He just Or
he's an anarchist.
Yeah. No.
Sorry, I've misused anarchist before, I guess.
Josh from Tucson. You guys should check out Kristen Sinema's Twitter ratios lately. They are great.
She scares me.
Real ace attorney. Be careful, Sam. Emma's wearing similar clothes. Oh, yeah, we already read that one. Talsaf, some bad news in Florida. The GOP state legislature is trying really hard to overturn the $15 minimum wage. I assume since they can't find any loopholes, they're trying to raise the percentage from 60 to 66% for an amendment to pass. This would cause the minimum wage raise not to be required to put into law if they succeed. The SPCL has a section to contact state legislatures and put pressure on them to stop this from passing. I mean, it's fascinating.
That's unreal. How can they do that after they did a ballot initiative?
Oh, they've done this before. I mean, Michigan did that with the emergency. I mean, the amazing thing is that, and they did it with
I knew that they were going to try to do something like this, but it blows my mind that it's allowed, is what I'm saying.
Former convicts to vote. I mean, what is amazing to me is there's no political price, it seems, to pay when they do this in Michigan, when they do this in Florida. Like, the electorate just sort of says, like, psh, I guess it doesn't work to get engaged. And that's the sort of the dangerous part about it, right?
100%,
is that,
yeah. You get people believing that what they voted for, it doesn't matter anyway.
Doesn't matter.
And it really doesn't. It's like they went to the polls, they voted for this thing, it passed, but it's not going to happen.
First person user, liking the Twitch shout out, Sam. I'd like to request you to develop a hearty "let's go" and use the term "debated" more. Okay.
I don't get it.
I don't either. The Tim Caucus. Every time Sam says quick break, I think it's got to be quick line. It's stuck in my head. I blame you two. Great interview. Excellent topic. And love the space you provide for guests to openly blame capitalism.
I'm going to find a way to play that when Sam's out next as a soundboard thing.
Yeah, Matt'll pull it. Jetty Duck. The clear solution to this clothes matching situation is for one of you to bring back the mustache. Comrade Mario, wish Michael was here to see the Lula comeback. Yeah, I know. I keep, it's impossible not to, sort of have that thought, frankly. White to work. Wait, Sam and Rachel Maddow are different characters? Same actor, though. Poggers. Christo, Adam Curtis, please. Good idea. Soy Cedar, have Hassan Piker on a Friday soon so he can give you guys a crash course on Twitch. Evan from New Jersey, Hoggers is much better than Poggers. Eric from Iowa, Emma and Sam, you two should reach out to Hassan for Twitch Culture 101. The guy's a master.
Yeah, well, I mean, but this is why, like, I love Hassan, but I don't know how to communicate with him in this way because I don't know anything about this. I don't know anything about Twitch. I did, like, 2 Twitch events for TYT, and I was at a loss. I don't like game or anything like that, so I don't.
Explaining Twitch to Sam from Hassan is going to be like explaining rock music to like a peasant in the Middle Ages. It's just going to turn him into dust.
I mean, I think that's a fair statement.
You just aged 10 years on the spot in a 5-minute conversation.
Prairie Fire Kowalski from Nebraska. Hi, Amar. I have some prairie news. The grass is starting to turn green here. I'm ready for spring, warmer days, getting vaccinated, and calving season. Some bad prairie news. Drought could be an issue moving into planting season due to global food production issues last year. I'd recommend growing a garden if you have the space. Emma, I'm concerned with your physical health. I had a lingering back problem after falling off the roof of a combine onto the hood of a pickup. Oh, Kowalski. I found that just regular cardio makes me feel better, both physically and mentally. Humans are evolved to be long-distance runners, so it can be like meditation.
Well, yeah, I mean, I hate running and I hate cardio, but I try my best. It's just like so women have wider hips. It's harder for them to run longer distances sometimes.
All right. Ride a bike. Ryan from the deep state. 17 states are trying to outlaw life-saving medical care for trans kids. 24 states are trying to ban trans women athletes. There's a coordinated nationwide assault on trans rights, and not enough people on the left online are talking about it. Yeah, actually, Brendan, I wanted to put... who was it that we were talking about getting on?
The famous lawyer, Chase, someone.
From the ACLU?
Chase Strangio.
Okay. Yeah, I think we should do that to get more granular on that stuff. Boomer Emma is more boomer than Boomer Sam. Dab. You know what a dab is.
Yeah, I'm
being
aware.
facetious.
Right. Well,
Fade away, Jay. Hey, Sam and Emma. Curious if you saw Milo Yiannopoulos' announcement. Yeah, this is pretty good stuff. So, ladies and gentlemen, it's been a long time since we had any reason to say the name Milo Yiannopoulos. And maybe this story is not a coincidence in that regard. Maybe this story is a function of someone wanting people to say his name again.
Who?
Milo Yiannopoulos.
Right.
My point is that maybe...
I got that.
Right. So this is from LifeSite News.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, what are you going to do? It's the only people reporting about it. Nobody else cares. He probably has some friends there. Anyways.
Friends.
LifeSite News reports, March 9th, 2021, Milo Yiannopoulos, the gay man, whose conservative messaging and willingness to speak the truth sparked riots on university campuses, may well trigger more outrage now that he describes himself as ex-gay and sodomy-free, and is leading a daily consecration to St. Joseph online. Let's just take a quick break. Brendan, who's that?
That's anti-Catholic, Sam.
No, it's not.
St. Joseph?
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be Jesus's like non-father father?
I thought it was Jesus.
He's the patron saint of workers and associated with various feast days.
I don't get it. Well, all right. Well, let me read some of this then.
Yeah, Joseph is the figure of canonical Gospels who's married to Mary, mother of Jesus.
Oh, that guy. Okay. Yeah, all right. Sorry, didn't know.
His dad. Or not his dad, sorry, his stepdad.
When I used to kid, imagine, okay, and Lifeside says, I imagine to many that follow you, your recent decision to publicly identify as Milo, ex-gay, may seem like a 180-degree turn, as opposed to when he identified as Milo, presently gay. Are you surprised your life has taken this turn? Or is it unsurprising, a natural and perhaps inevitable progression in your life to become ex-gay?
Yeah.
And he says, well, when I used to kid, I became that I only became gay to torment my mother. I wasn't entirely joking. He said, of course, I was never wholly at home in the gay lifestyle. Milo was never wholly at home in the gay lifestyle, incidentally. I mean, who is? Who could be?
Well, it's just a way to get back at your mom. Every kid does that.
And only leaned heavily into it in public because it drove liberals crazy to see a handsome, charismatic, intelligent gay man riotously celebrating conservative principles. So his conservatism wasn't fake. His gayness was.
I would say, yeah. I think the bigger problem is he's attention worthy. But I also, what does this mean for his whole "I'm not a racist" defense? Because that whole thing was like, was either married or dating a black man. So if he's no longer, like, if that relationship is over, I guess he's racist then.
Well, he might have to date
officially say.
Might have to date a black woman. He's got to find one, but a woman to date. But
he said at one point that now his okay, in what ways has this impacted your personal and social life? Well, the guy I live with has been demoted to housemate, which hasn't been easy for either of us.
So he broke up with him, and now they're roommates?
Now they're roommates. It helps that I can still just about afford to keep him in Gavins and a new Porsche every year. Could be worse for him, I guess. You know,
right.
Wasn't he broke? I mean, I'm starting to think this is I'll be honest with everybody. I think this is a joke. I don't think he's ex-gay.
He's trolling. I mean, he says, I treat it like an addiction. You never stop being an alcoholic. I hope people will support and pray for me, if for no other reason than they share my delight at the prospect of Milo Yiannopoulos, he refers to himself in the third person, furiously and indignantly railing against homosexuals for sins of the flesh. Over the next decade, I would like to rehabilitate what the media calls conversion therapy. So basically, he's going to go to conversion therapy, and then he also added trannies are demonic.
He needs a way into religious money. I mean, this is a guy who's been basically deplatformed from everything. He lives on attention, like pays his rent off of it, and this is a way to get it.
Yeah, he has. I mean, this is without a doubt a job application. You know, this is basically it. I mean, if he's not already getting paid for this.
Oh my goodness. There's going to be some closeted conversion therapy televangelist here in the United States who's going to be like, I want to talk to him for...
He's going to be able to go around on the whole, you know, there's a whole probably circuit, and he'll be able to go around. And it's interesting because wasn't he like... Didn't he say, like, during the Trump thing that he was, like, going to make everybody pay? There was something like that. He's just, this guy's, it's fascinating. He says, my own life changed dramatically, though it crept up on me while I wasn't paying attention. I'm someone who responds to micromanagement and accountability, so I found counting days an effective bulwark against sin. In the last 250 days, I've only slipped once, which is a lot better than I predicted I would do. So good for him.
Congrats on the one time you had sex in 250 days.
Yeah, I mean, I'm curious as to, like...
He thinks it's a brag, but I'm just like...
I wonder if he's not having sex either with women because he's not married, right? Yeah, this is all just... I wonder if
he's
like,
not having sex with women because he's gay.
This is that's also possible. I think what he's doing is trying to position, there's going to be a huge, like we just got an IM about it, and it's obvious around the country, there's a massive transphobia push. They're going to, it's going to be, the right is going to be talking about immigrants and trans people. And the best is the last line is pretty good too of this, where he says, as you might expect, my professional priorities are shifting somewhat given my new spiritual preoccupations. Over the next decade, I'd like to help rehabilitate, like you read this, what the media calls conversion therapy. It does work, albeit not for everybody. As for my other aspirations and plans, well, no change. I always considered abortion to be the preeminent moral horror of human history. I'll keep saying so, even more loudly than before, and be allowed to go on those programs. This is me editorializing. And be allowed to go on those programs now that I am officially not gay.
Even more loudly because someone will be listening to me.
Yep. And they say, if you let one sin in, others will follow. And now I truly know what that means. As I've begun to resist sinful sexual urges, I found myself drinking less, smoking less, you name it. I confess my weakness for designer shoes and handbags is yet to dissipate. But
as he brags about his housemate giving him Givenchy,
no, he gives it to his housemate.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, so I guess he's purging himself of the luxury items.
Well, no, apparently he can buy them and just keep his gay housemate
happy.
Happy is what he's trying to say.
Since they're not sleeping together anymore.
Right, because they're not sleeping. He's just a roommate. Handbags yet to dissipate. But I'm coming to realize, however slowly, that lust, per Augustine, I would imagine that's Saint Augustine, is disordered desire for all sorts of things, not just NFL players. I mean, this guy's, he's joking. I think the whole thing is, is a put on some level. I would,
of course.
And you know what the brilliance though of I've slipped one time in the past 250 days is? That means that someone would have to find 2 instances of him slipping, and then it's just like, oh, I lost count.
Yeah.
Like if you say I have not engaged in any type of sexual activity for 250 days, someone comes up with one, then you're in big trouble. But if you don't make it binary, but rather you put yourself on a sliding scale, well, I want to say that I'm ex-gay, but really I'm just less gay.
Right.
Right? I mean, basically and you give yourself an out.
And he still has a weakness for NFL players, which, again, the part of his long history of overly sexualizing often black bodies, but I digress. He as if that's it's just a vice, it's such just bizarre framing.
Here's the slip I think people should remember of Milo is if you're talking about whether or not he's gay, you're not talking about whether or not he's a white supremacist.
God shed his grace on me.
So there you go.
Wait, what was that?
That was him singing karaoke with Richard Spencer and other Nazis, Sig Hailing in the crowd.
Yep.
Oh, jeez.
We should say that unless he gets gay again, we're probably not going to talk about Milo Yiannopoulos again. Every time he switches, he gets ex-gay or because he's ex-gay. If he gets ex-gay, then we will talk about him again. But this is it. So that's the problem with this. He gets a one-off, but he's going on a different circuit.
It was the final rabbit to pull out of his hat, and that's all he's got. Maybe Jimmy.
Dave Rubin's like, ooh, damn! I was gonna do that in fall. My
son of a bitch stole my line.
I know. He really.
Well, I think Rubin is not going to promote that he's ex-gay. I think he's going to just I think the way that Rubin will do it is just it'll come up at one point and it'll literally be, he'll be being interviewed by his boss, Glenn Beck, and Beck will say, now you're ex-gay. And Rubin will go, oh yes, no, I stopped being gay 6 months ago. And it was difficult because I realized that I thought of my husband, I realize he's more of a friend.
Well, no, I realize he's more of a producer. I mean,
Right.
that's part of the issue that Ruben has, is that he can't be ex-gay because then he'd lose the guy that writes all his scripts and does his show for him.
Well, no, I mean, he just like, you know, you could still, you don't want to, you know, you could just say like, you're my producer now, and that's it. We're getting divorced and you're my producer. It's not, stranger things have happened. I mean, I wouldn't want to work with my ex, you know, in that way. That would be uncomfortable, but, you know.
Okay.
Could be a lot of cash.
Well, I'm
involved in
glad
that
you
for him.
solved that problem for him.
Speaking of issues with spouses, Dennis Prager apparently is trying to.
This was my choice clip of the day. Thank you
Subtle.
for picking it out.
Please go ahead.
Well, no, I mean,
Introduce it.
Dennis Prager wants you to know about his sex life and his preferences that are a little rapey, as they say.
And basically what I said was this: given how important sex is to most men, it is, if you love your husband, and I said that, and he treats you well, don't always allow mood to determine whether you will sleep with him. Because mood, yes, it's not only fair enough, the number of couples who have told me that it has so helped their marriage is innumerable. That was it. I didn't say if you look like Frankenstein.
It's probably innumerable.
You must sleep with your husband. All I said was, in general, don't let feelings be the only determinant of your behavior. That was the radical nature of what I wrote.
Well, we know how radical the left gets on feelings versus facts these days.
It is.
Fucks don't. Can I just go real quick? Fucks don't care about your feelings.
That was amazing. Yeah, it's what should motivate you to have sex with your husband then? Just it's because it's your marital duty?
No, how well he treats you.
Oh, right.
What kind of allowance he gives you.
Yes.
Does he let you use the credit card and go to, you know, Neiman Marcus?
Right.
And if he does, then you should give him sex.
It is
I mean, I think that's right. I mean, is that not the...
I mean, this is like, I feel like the premise of a more raunchy I Love Lucy plot, but yeah, it's like all about, you know, she'll be a good wife if Desi gives her a little bit more of an allowance. And I think I learned a little too much about Dennis Prager's sex life. A little bit there. He goes on TV to rant about, hey,
now,
I don't
think-
need to make my wife feel nice or feel good. I expect that she has sex with me just because it's her duty.
Do you think that it's possible that this is Prager's way of basically complaining maybe a little bit about things that like...
Yeah, no therapy for me, no marriage therapy. I'm not going to really talk to my wife about her feelings, maybe why she's not interested in having sex with me, maybe because I expect things and don't communicate with her. Instead, I think I'm just going to go on OAN, air our sex life publicly, and then hopefully she responds. It's very classic conservative, passive-aggressive communication styles. I almost respect it, honestly.
Prager...
This is a long-standing problem with Prager, though, and I should go back and see how that came up, because he said something like this before, and people have been making fun of him for it for a year or so.
He was responding to a segment done by Samantha Bee. That was what the Chiron. But I mean, like, think about where this takes the conversation. Okay, but women should, no matter her mood, have sex with her husband. That is rape. That's rape. I mean, that is a real old school dynamic that he's trying to project onto everyday society that I think is a lot more personal than he's admitting there.
And folks, I think, I hope everyone realizes that it certainly in my lifetime, but I mean, I think I was still an adult where you still had a tremendous number of states in this country where you could not be charged with rape if it was your wife. that
Donald
the
Trump was
concept,
accused of it,
the
by the way.
concept of raping your wife was it's not possible. She's your wife. I mean, up until very recently, many states, and certainly, at one point it was all states, your wife was your chattel. My mom, when I was my son's age, who's now 8, my mom still, I don't think, could get a credit card in her name. I mean, it was nuts. I mean, it's sort of, think of the concept of that. It's just bizarre.
Again, yeah, but think of how, too, he's privileging his own desires and sees his desires as paramount and should overrule her feelings.
Of course.
I mean, that's just of course. That's instinct.
Well, it's interesting that it has to be sort of argued as this is just good for everybody, as opposed to what that used to be, which is just like, yeah, woman, like, this is your job, right? Like, you have to dress it up in pragerese.
Ladies, the way to have a good marriage is to service your husband, regardless of what you're interested in. If you want a good marriage, it's only if you want a good marriage. If you don't want a good marriage, then that's what it is. It's nice. It's nice to be a guy because you don't really have any of the same obligations.
She'll feel happier if she ignores her feelings and only respects her husband's.
As a married man, my only responsibility to maintaining the good marriage is to have a desire for sex.
Yes.
And then everything else takes care of itself because my wife is obligated to provide for me.
And then just throw a roll of hundreds at her at the beginning of the week, and then she's all set.
I leave it on the bureau.
Yeah, it's too much effort to actually do the wrist flick.
No, that's rude.
Uh,
The Chris Lepaco. I zinged Stephanie Miller pretty good today. She does Psaki bombs throughout the show where she plays sound drops of Jen Psaki owning reporters who ask stupid both sides type questions. So I called in and told the call screener I wanted to praise Joe Biden for his vaccine rollout. When I got on, I told her to do a Psaki bomb of Jen Psaki telling immigrants and refugees not come to the border. I ended the call with left is best, girls rule the world.
That's hilarious.
Oh my God. Damian, are you ever going to have Hassan Piker on? I would love to hear. What is going on? Is it Hassan? Wait, is he?
I don't know.
Is he slammed our chat today?
Haas is big. I mean, he's very, very famous on Twitch, and I don't understand Twitch. Yeah, he's huge. He's he's killing it there.
Miguelito, is it possible to get that getting 20 to 30-year-olds in politics is the secret to winning, but a completely impossible task?
I don't know what that means.
In politics.
Into politics, like getting them interested into politics.
It's not impossible. I think that our generation, I'm nearly 27. I think that my peers are as engaged as I've ever seen them.
Well, but you're their age. I mean, presumably you get more engaged as you get older. But I think it is safe to say that
right, it's 20 and people in their 20s.
People in their 20s are probably, in general, more engaged in politics than I think certainly past generations. Would be my guess. I
mean, yeah, I just see even the TikTok generation, the kids that are 18, 19 right now, they could not be more engaged in politics. I think the Trump era was very mobilizing.
Artie, Samuel, stop sniffing your boogers. Take a decongestant. Yeah, I don't know what happened. Something hit me in the middle of the show, and my nose is going crazy. So I'm some type of allergic reaction. PDX Tony, what happens if hypothetical Massachusetts just refuses to pay Canadian maple syrup manufacturers and keeps their syrup regulations in place? You mean, what is the enforcement mechanism? I mean, I presume it's, more fines, and it breaks the treaty. Certainly. And I guess presumably they would go to the federal government and try and get some. I mean, I don't know ultimately what the enforcement mechanism is for that. But it's, you could go rogue, but then you would never have a treaty again with anybody. I mean, let's put it this way. What is the enforcement mechanism of any international treaty? Ultimately, there isn't.
Breaking news, by the way, the COVID relief bill passed the House.
Charge. There you go. Not
210
surprising.
to 1 Democrat voted no. All Republicans voted.
Who voted no?
I just have the vote tally. It doesn't say who voted no, but I can find out. Because Kurt Schrader of Oregon said he was going to vote yes, even though he voted no on the one that included the $15 minimum wage. So I would assume it was the other representative, and I'm now blanking on who that was.
I don't remember. Folks, smash that like button. Only 600 to go until we get to 2,000.
Nice.
Apparently, according to Married to Mothra. Comrade Mario. Emma, I'm sorry, that seems like a bubble. An average American 20-year-old does not follow any of this stuff. Well, I mean, the average American does not follow much of this stuff, period.
No, I'm just saying, yes, agreed. I just think that young kids, coming up right now in the Trump era, I think, and Black Lives Matter too. I mean, that was like very, very engaging for a lot of people who normally weren't engaged in politics, and it was in some ways more for than posting a black square on Twitter. But I mean, people I knew who were kind of apolitical were marching in the streets. So it's just like, I don't know. I think it's on average a little bit more.
All right, we got 5 minutes here. Jared Golden from Maine was the one who voted no.
Yes.
We got time for one more call. Sorry, folks. 551 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
It's A Square. Hi, Sam.
A Square, how's it going? What's on your mind?
Just quickly, I wanted to clarify something that I am you guys yesterday. I'm a bit vexed or upset about Nando and Anna talking about BLM as if there is nothing to show for the movement. And I think they're specifically talking about labor gains. And so I'll leave it to you to have a discussion and listen to it before you comment, of course, to be fair. But when I listen to what we have today, we got the COVID relief plan passed. The PRO Act at least passed in Congress. And we know that it's going to take another 2 to 3 years, really, honestly, to get some of these labor reforms reinstituted. But I think that we're losing the forest for the trees here. And one of the things that I
How did labor connect to their argument with BLM? I'm not exactly sure what.
Well, Nando specifically is saying that what's the value of all the BLM protests in the streets if there's no labor gains? And I'm sitting there listening to them, and I'm saying, exactly the question that you asked. These were organic, simultaneous, worldwide protests that have pushed. Forget the overtone window. They have completely pushed.
But why would BLM why is BLM connected to labor policy?
You know what? That is a great question, Emma, and I hope you have the opportunity to have that discussion. I don't know why they've mentioned it in at least 3 of their Saturday programs. That what is what was the value of all of that protest during the summer? And this was a worldwide protest. So I'm struggling with not seeing the relationship between some of these movements and protests from 2020 with a lot of the gains, a lot of the progressive gains that we've had. And so it is.
Was he trying to say that there wasn't enough support from labor groups?
No, they're just specifically talking about no labor union power to use as a leverage mechanism to push the Democratic Party left. And I'm thinking,
I'm confused. I'm confused by it. But let me just, and maybe we'll check it out. But I could say this, that I mean, I think relative to the size of the protest nationally and internationally, we haven't seen enough on the federal level, right? I mean, like, they passed the George Floyd Act in the House. I don't think it's going to pass in the Senate. And there's a couple of good things in there. Qualified immunity would be great to get rid of. But we did see, and I would not be satisfied with this, but cities like New York, I think we saw it in LA. I mean, certainly smaller cities also around the country, where you have various programs of at least some cuts to police funding and some pilot programs to sort of figure out if there is a way to diminish the size of the police budget and portfolio and not criminalize things that should not be criminal. A, and B, you also can say that, like, the NBC News
I can't imagine. I mean,
has a study that just shows that you had voter registration surge during BLM protests, and the value of that is everything that's going to come out of that COVID relief bill, frankly, and as well as in Georgia. I'm not sure I follow that they're looking for. Maybe there would have been more. I don't think they were
trying to make that argument. I know. I mean, I'll have to listen. I have to listen myself. I just,
Yeah, please do because I think it requires clarification, because I think that the other thing that it's just very vexing is this fracturing of the left in so many pieces, and I think that there is. I'm struggling myself with this argument that all that matters is having labor gains and labor reform and the power of labor in the United States, when right now only 6% to 10%, depending on the sector, in this country is unionized, and also there's an increase in knowledge workers and PMCs that have been very resistant to unionize. I can vouch for that in industry, but I guess I'm having a very hard time understanding why there has to be an appreciation for the power of movements. They may not lead to specific gains in labor and in other areas, but the push is getting us more progressive policies in general that can lead to labor reforms. But so forgive me if I'm I'm a little scattered with these thoughts. Is that listen to the last two Saturday shows, Emma, whenever you can, and it's worth having a discussion with them, because I think that
they're good folks. I mean, I think maybe there was. Maybe.
Well, who knows? I mean, we got to just look at it. But
yeah.
I appreciate the call, A Squared. Thank you. Okay. And I think just the general point is, I mean, it is. I think there is, and and I think this is going to become. I've seen it in the context of the COVID relief bill. No $15 minimum wage, and I think that is a huge. It's a horrible situation, a huge missed opportunity. And it's, in my estimation, I know there were 8 senators that voted against it, but it's really basically the Biden administration just said, we don't want it in the bill because it's going to be too hard, and we're going to have to exact too high of a price to get people like Joe Manchin to vote for it. But at the same time, I do think that there is a lack of recognition of gains that are being made, and I do think that's problematic on some level, because just like the implications of the Florida legislature, let's say overturning the $15 minimum wage, sends a signal to people that there's no point in getting engaged into politics. And I don't think that your engagement in politics should end at voting, but it very often begins at voting. And if you are convinced that, and your desire to get engaged at that level is foreclosed, then I don't think you go any further more often than not. I mean, I do think that I certainly think it's conceivable that you could go through voting to get more engaged on the ground in mutual aid and actual organizing, and then your sort of interest in electoral politics wanes on some level. But it's silly not to go in and pull a lever when you know that there's an opportunity for some material gains to happen. And to deny the material value of this package that just passed is it's diluted.
I agree. I just want to make clear that we don't know that that was the argument.
No, I'm not imparting this to I'm not imparting that to them. I don't care. That's irrelevant. I mean, people can go and check out and listen to their show and see if they're making a cogent argument in that way. But it's irrelevant. But the larger point that there is a fixation on what is not achieved as opposed to the exclusion of what is achieved is definitely a dynamic that exists online. I don't know. I'm not attributing it to Nando.
Yes, and I think it's
Anna.
because it's safer for people to feel that way, or it's safer commentary because they can hide in a cloak of cynicism or under a warm, cozy blanket of kind of, oh, everything sucks, as opposed to looking at things from an analytical.
I mean, it's muscle memory in a certain sense.
I think it's muscle memory. I think there is an incentive structure. And I should remind people, you could take the people who, listen to all of these podcasts and all of these shows, and you would not have that many people. The real impact of it is, to the extent that there is a real world impact, it is either on, what those people go out and do, the audiences, and also the influence it has on the media. So I think there is it is easy to live online and assume that the left is more fractured than it is. And by the left, I'm talking in a general sense. I'm not, I know that, some people take offense to using the left loosely, but that's the way I mean it. I
just say, like, practically now how that comes in is like, what do you get for, say, assuming the PRO Act has no chance because the Democrats are going to stab it in the back at some point versus, phone banking for it and hoping that it actually does get passed. And, you might be right that the Democrats are going to fail somehow, but what use is that other than for I guess branding in the moment to sell you on your attitude towards the future?
We'll talk about the substance of the bill, and then, you can say and throw a caveat in okay, well, we need Democrats to fight for this, but just talking about cynically about politics isn't analyzing politics in the same way. You have to also talk about the policy and what could happen if it were to pass, because then that creates positive momentum for it to do so.
I mean, I do think there is value for people to show dissent and that they're unsatisfied because it pushes things. But I also think from an analytical perspective too, there is at one point diminishing returns on that, and that you sort of disenfranchise people in that respect in terms of their interest and their engagement.
On that point, at this point in Obama's administration, it was the freeloader narrative that started the Tea Party coming out of the right. And if right now what you're getting is left narratives, I don't think that's necessary. That's an improvement, I think. Yep. Of being upset.
I think we've got more time to sort of see what is going on, and I think complaining about and being dissatisfied is helpful in pushing this administration and just broadly our politicians. All right, I only have time for 2 IMs because I'm late. Ban Dongino. A surplus is bad because it means the government isn't investing into the public enough. Yes. And I think if you go back and look historically, every time we get a surplus or close to it, we end up going into a recession, because if the government has more money as a surplus, that means there's a deficit in the private sector. Davey 9000, Emma, regarding the second stimulus check, it was probably mailed to your old address. You moved last year, right? That's creepy.
Yes, I did move. It was I changed my mailing address with the post office.
And the final IM of the day, I almost said address. Bob Dork You should Google the American Library Association's top 10 most challenged books and see if you can spot a common theme. It will tell you who's banning books. Interesting. All right, folks. See you tomorrow.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught.